Hi, this is Andy with One Way Pest Solutions out of Boston, Massachusetts, and you are listening to the world's #1 pest control training podcast, the Pest Geek Podcast with Frank Hernandez.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek, here discussing all things pest. We want to remind our audience to join in on the revolution. That's right, join in on the conversation, be part of the society. Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group on Facebook. And we're on YouTube. We're on the web, pestgeekpodcast.com. Check out there the notes, everything that we put into the podcast. They're all on there. And here is Stephen Van Tassel with today's topic.
Thanks, Frank. This is Stephen Van Tassel, Wildlife Control Consultant, bringing to you another podcast on something related to wildlife control. Today I wanted to talk about and ask you a basic question. Are you using traps to catch vertebrate animals to full effect? Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is that sometimes when you're busy and situations arrive in your wildlife, when you're doing wildlife control, you may have a bunch of clients out in that day. Are you shortchanging the client that you're visiting to do some wildlife control by just tossing some traps on the property, throwing some bait inside, and then going on your merry way so you can get to the real work of doing bug control? Well, my experience is limited as it's been in terms of my following along with various pest control companies, that sometimes that happens. Now, it happens even to wildlife control operators. But if time is money, it's important for you to realize that you want to get that problem over as quickly as possible. You can't always do it this way, but I want you to think about, are you using your cage traps or box traps to full effect? And what I want you to think about today is that there are 3 basic sets that you can use, 3 categories of sets that you could use your cage and box traps for. Most of you, I would assume, are familiar with the old standby of what we call the baited set. You're simply putting something that's attracting the animal to walk into the cage. That is your normal baited set, whether it be molasses or sugar wafers or chicken or tuna or a professionally manufactured bait or the old standby peanut butter. You're putting something in the back of that cage or box to lure that animal into the set. That's your standard bread and butter set. But there's different sets available to you than just that one. And those are what I want to talk about today. So we've already mentioned the baited set. So what's the next one? The next one that's often frequently not used is the blind set. The blind set is a trapping without the use of bait. And you say, well, how are you able to do that? Well, it's because you're placing the trap where that animal is going to be, or you're forcing the animal to enter the trap because you know where the animal is. Typically, blind sets are used with traps that have 2 doors. So that way it's like a tunnel that the animal's going to walk through. It hits the trigger in the middle, whether it be a treadle or hanging wires, hits those triggers, and then both doors close, rather than a baited trap where it's typically a 1 door is open. So the blind set has the ability that there's no bait attracting it. And so you would often simply place it on a trail that that the animal's doing, or more likely, if you have a situation where you know where the animal's leaving underneath the deck or underneath the house or out from the house, is you're barricading the entrance of that trap so that the only thing it's going to catch is coming either out of the hole or coming in from the outside of the other end of the trap. So there's no bait luring animals to that location. It's purely a locational set. I think it's really underutilized. Now, it does require you to use two-door traps. And sometimes when, space is a priority on your trucks. So typically, two-door traps tend to be longer than your single-door traps, which means it's going to take up more space. But the time element of it is incredible because you don't have to worry about, did the animal like the bait? Did the bait going to wear out? Is the bait going to attract insects? Is the bait going to attract cats? You don't have to worry about any of those things because there is no bait in a blind set. It's truly blind because the animal doesn't see anything there. It's simply walking through the trail. That's your blind set. Love the blind set. Now, if you're worried about spacing considerations, there is a newer trap on the market called the the Comstock trap. This is a trap that's only been out for a few years now. It's a two-door trap. They have extremely powerful springs on the doors, which allows the trap doors to close very quickly. So these traps are basically no larger than a corresponding single door size trap, but these are two-door traps. It is revolutionizing the wildlife control industry. A lot of guys are using these traps in a variety of situations because they're significantly smaller and they work. So I'm going to just sort of give a shout out to the Comstock trap. They're produced and they're manufactured now by Tomahawk. And just in truth and advertising, Tomahawk has had a business relationship with me. They've sponsored one of the books that I've published, but I'm not getting any fee for them selling Comstock traps. Okay, so don't think I'm making money every time they buy one. That's simply not true. I wish it was. I'd be happy to have it. But the reality is that the Comstock traps, they are pricey. They're built like tanks. But they are being used in a variety of ways where people are even using them on buildings where they simply screw it to the side of the building and basically screen the raccoon hole. So the raccoon comes out of the attic entrance, crawls down the side of the building and gets trapped in the Comstock trap that's placed up against the side of the building. They can even catch animals when they are upside down. That's how powerful the spring doors are. So check it out. It gives you another tool. But I want to mention a third type of set. That's called the positive trap set. So we have the baited set that I've already mentioned. We have the blind set, which was just talked about. Now we're turning to the positive set. Now, why do we call it a positive set? Because you're positively catching the guilty animal. Now, I don't like to use the word guilty because it makes it seem that the animals are committing crimes or something. It's simply not the case. But your clients often think that they're worried about, especially for those of you guys who are charging by the visit or charging per animal, your client is worried about you attracting animals that are off property into your trap and racking up a bigger fee. With positive trapping, that's simply not possible because you are barricading the trap so that the only thing you're catching is what's coming out of the hole. So understand that these are typically going to be one-door traps that you are barricading over that skunk burrow or over that squirrel hole, and that the only thing you're going to be able to catch is whatever's coming out of that hole. That's what's called positive trapping, because you're positively catching the guilty animal. You can't catch anything on the outside. Now, I want to give you a little caution here. As great as that technique is, you need to keep in mind that if you're in a time where there's a mating season, like with skunks, for instance, like in February and early March, you need to have at least one trap facing out, because the males, if you're trapping for a female under that deck, the males are going to keep coming in and digging underneath because they're going to smell that female in there. So you're going to have at least one trap facing out to catch that male coming in. Same way when you're trapping squirrels, you want to have if you're going to use a positive set, you don't know if that squirrel's in the house at that time or outside the house. So you need to have your positive trap placed over the burrow, over the hole, and then have a baited set nearby in case the squirrel was on the outside of the house when you set your positive trap. But the beauty of positive trapping is you know whether anything's going in and out, and you're going to catch whatever's coming out of that particular hole. Now, when you're using positive traps, you would want to use something that would be you can sometimes put bait inside of them to help encourage the animal out of the hole, but it's not necessarily a requirement. Some guys simply use doors that are basically like one-way doors, so the animal just pushes the door open and then gets trapped in a compartment. Sometimes there are attachments so people can keep easily sliding new traps onto this positive set, so that way you don't have to keep unscrewing everything. Talk to your trap manufacturer to see about these inserts. They can really speed things along. Don't forget to add some covers to these traps because they're going to be very visible to the public and animals are going to be stressed in them. So let's go run down that list one more time. We have baited sets. A lot of you are familiar with. We're going to talk more about how to bait sets properly in a future podcast. The next set we have is our blind set, which is used with a 2-door trap placed in a trail, or it's placed over the hole where the animal is going to be located, and the animal just simply walks out. These are blind sets, are awesome sets when we're dealing with woodchucks, skunks. They can be used in squirrels with the Comstock trap and even raccoon situations, but typically the blind sets are ground-dwelling animals. It's very convenient, and the Comstock trap can really give you some greater flexibility when you're using it on structures as well. And then the last type of set, of course, is your positive set, where you're placing the trap, the one-door trap over that particular hole or burrow, that you're only going to catch the animal coming out of that hole. Take the time to make sure you are trying to capture that animal as quick as possible. In my opinion, using baited sets should be your last choice when trying to do wildlife control in an urban setting. The only times you should really be relying on baited sets are when you're dealing with transient damage. This is damage that's occurring where the animal's not living on the property, but simply feeding on the property or passing through. But if you have a situation where you know where the animal's living on the property, your baited sets you should be looking at positive sets, blind sets, and if you're using baited sets, they should be done in conjunction with a lot of those other types of sets, rather than just simply tossing some traps on the property near the hole and going from there. Try to get those jobs done as quickly as possible so you can move on to your next client. I'm Stephen Van Tassel for Wildlife Control Consultant. Thanks for listening. Back to you, Frank.
We hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Until next time, have a pestacular day.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.